very warm welcome from beautiful Thailand. My name is John and I will be your host. The topic for today is the importance of boundaries. And this, I feel and believe, is a very important life principle to understand, because it could make the difference between happy, healthy, wholesome relationships or a nightmare. And what I mean by that is how we experience the interactions in our relationships, whether it be personal, romantic relationships, whether it be professional relationships, or whether it just be casual friendship. The whole principle of boundaries is very, very important to understand. Before we start, I just want to let you know that I will be using a comprehensive PowerPoint presentation, and the reason for that is firstly, that the majority of people process information visually, so they benefit from listening and seeing. And secondly, it also helps to keep me on track, seeing that I have got a limited time period to cover the material. So let's get started. We teach people how to treat us. And I want you to think about that for a second. And I'm borrowing this quote from Dr. Phil McGraw. What do I mean by that? How does that work? People do to us what they do because they can. People treat me poorly because they can. People are unkind to me, and if they continue to do so, because they can. What is the reason for that? A lack of boundaries. A lack of boundaries invites a lack of respect. And I've seen this over and over when people do not know what your boundaries are, when people do not know what you will allow and what not, when people do not know how far they can go with you, it very often creates a lack of respect, because if we have a lack of boundaries, we tend to send a message that everything is okay and people can treat us the way that they wish to. So it's all about the presence or lack of boundaries that will determine how people treat us and what they do to us. What is a boundary? Let's look at what we are talking about when we refer to a boundary. I'm not going to go into semantics and the definition of a boundary. I want to look at it from a practical point of view with regards to daily application. To me, a boundary is simply deciding and communicating what I will allow myself to experience and what not. Deciding, first of all, I need to figure out where I want boundaries in place. And secondly, I need to communicate that, what it is that I will allow and what it is that I will not allow. What is the line that I will not allow anybody else to cross? That is my responsibility. And I used to believe for the most part that people should know better. People should know how to treat me. Well, it doesn't always quite work like that. It is my responsibility. Healthy boundaries provide a safe space to relate in and from. Safe space meaning a sense of security, a sense of predictability. I know what to expect. A space to relate in. Within my boundaries, I can communicate, I can relate, I can let people know how far they can go, what it is that I will allow, what it is that I will not allow. And as I said, that is 100% my responsibility. So as the previous slide indicated, that people treat me the way they do because they can, and that I teach people how to treat me. And that is the result of either a lack of boundaries or the presence of boundaries, and boundaries being what I decide, what I will allow myself to experience and what I will not allow myself to experience. Well, apart from using a comprehensive PowerPoint presentation, I also want to let you know that I'm going to be repeating certain things from time to time, and not because I've got a poor memory, but because it is important that we hear certain principles over and over for it to become part of the way that we think. So this healthy space that I create with my healthy boundaries, I'm able to relate within in how I communicate, and also from. And what I mean by that is not only is it important that I establish and communicate healthy boundaries towards others, but that I also have healthy boundaries for myself. What I will allow myself to do, how far I will allow myself to go. So it really works both ways. My boundaries send a message to others of what I will allow, and my boundaries also send a message to myself, also what I will allow myself to do. And in that whole process, both ways contribute towards creating the safe space that I can operate or relate in and from. Another very important principle to understand that if a boundary is not communicated, it does not exist. I remember for a long time feeling very frustrated with people who continually violated my boundaries. And my counselor said to one day, but John, until you communicate those boundaries, they only exist in your mind. They serve no real purpose. It's important to communicate the boundaries so that others know what the boundaries are. And then if they respect those boundaries, great. If they don't, at least you've got a place of reference that you can work then because you have communicated the boundary. Establish your boundaries. Decide what your boundaries are. Decide what it is that you no longer want to experience or no longer will you allow yourself to experience, and what it is that you will allow yourself to experience. Communicate those boundaries, put them into words and let people know. And then honor your boundaries. It's no point in establishing and communicating boundaries and then still allowing people to violate those boundaries. I need to honor myself. I need to respect myself and honor those boundaries. And we're going to look at how I can honor them. One of the ways, obviously, would be to remind people about those boundaries. So the boundary is the difference between my space and their space, how far I will allow myself to go and how close I will allow others to come. And a healthy boundary, as I said, creates a very healthy and safe space. Boundaries are the most effective form of confrontation because they communicate that you will no longer be accepting the consequences of somebody else's actions. An effective form of confrontation. Anybody that is like me, being an introvert, a shy person, I very often find it difficult to really speak my mind. So instead of confronting, communicate your boundaries. So what you're doing, you are addressing instead of confronting any negative, overwhelming, frustrating situation, potentially frustrating situation by communicating the boundaries. And what you communicate is the fact that you will no longer accept the consequences of somebody else's action, my responsibility. And I will probably say this a couple of times more. How people treat me is my responsibility. What people do to me is my responsibility. Maybe not initially, but what I allow to continue 100% remains my responsibility. So by communicating the boundaries, I take personal responsibility, and that contributes towards the kind of relationships that I will either enjoy or endure. There are three main kinds of boundaries. The first one is rigid boundaries, and rigid boundaries is normally the result of fear, insecurity, self-protection. Porous boundaries, where there are gaps, there are cracks within my boundaries. I allow certain things, although I may have communicated the boundary, but I still tend to allow certain things. That also comes from a place of insecurity and uncertainty. And then healthy boundaries, obviously, when I establish and communicate boundaries and I am able to enforce them. Let's look at what signifies rigid boundaries. A person with rigid boundaries will avoid intimacy and close relationships. And as I said, it normally comes from a place of fear, a place of hurt, maybe having had painful, negative experiences in the past. They are unlikely to ask for help because they might see asking for help as weakness. So they've put a very rigid boundary in place for themselves that they will never ask for help. They have very few close relationships because they find it difficult to enter into relationship with others because of the rigid boundaries which serve to protect themselves. And those boundaries then turn into walls and keep themselves in and keep others out. They tend to be very protective of personal information, or you should exercise a level of protection over your personal information. But these are people that nobody ever really learns anything about because they keep everything to themselves because of their inability to trust. They may seem detached, even with romantic partners. They only allow themselves to go so far and they remain detached. They don't really connect. They remain distant in order to protect themselves. So they keep others at a distance to avoid the possibility of rejection. And as I said in the beginning, coming from a place of fear. Porous boundaries, they tend to overshare personal information because the boundaries are not very clear and the boundaries have got cracks and holes in them. They find it difficult to say no to others, and they may feel guilty, they may feel sad, they might feel they don't want to disappoint others, so there may be some level of codependency. They get over-involved in other people's problems. They are inclined to fix and save others at their own expense. They're also very dependent on other people's opinions. They very often ask people what they think. They'll ask other people what is right and wrong. They find it very difficult to trust their own judgment. And they're also inclined to accept the abuse or disrespect of others in that they very often think they either deserve it, or if they just try hard enough, they may be able to change the person. And the main reason why they have porous boundaries is the fear of rejection if they do not comply with others. So these are the people who tend to be people pleasers, who tend to be rescuers, and it is their way of communicating their need. And then obviously the aim would be healthy boundaries, where a person with healthy boundaries will value his or her own opinions. They are confident in themselves, in their points of view, in their values, in their boundaries. They don't compromise their values for others. They won't do anything that goes against their beliefs or their values or their morals because they have a confidence in themselves. They will only share personal information in an appropriate way. They don't over or undershare. This person also knows personal wants and needs, and they can communicate them. They can communicate them in a way that doesn't make other people feel guilty or awkward. And again, it comes from a place of confidence. They know how far they can go. They are also accepting of the fact if others say no to them because they have healthy and clear boundaries for themselves. They are then able and willing to respect other people's boundaries. Just a thought that came up in my mind. For people who lack boundaries, or when I lack boundaries, and people who don't respect other people's boundaries, well, the two sort of go hand in hand. A person who doesn't have clear personal boundaries will very often be unaware of or completely disrespectful of other people's boundaries. So a person who continues to violate my boundaries invariably is somebody who lacks boundaries for themselves. And of course, the same applies for me. If I disrespect other people's boundaries, it is because I don't have healthy boundaries. What stops me from establishing boundaries? Now, as I intimated earlier on, there are different personalities. Some people are more introvert, private, concerned about other people's opinions, and others are more extrovert. They don't really care. So for those of us who have a challenge in setting healthy boundaries, what are some of the factors that we may need to be aware of to help us to establish those boundaries? Very often feelings of guilt and shame. We may feel guilty when we say no to others because we don't want to hurt others, we don't want to make other people feel bad, or it could be feelings of shame. We don't deserve being treated well by others, and very often these character traits are unconscious or subconscious. We may not be consciously aware of them, and of course they very often are the result of patterns and conditioning that we experience from an early age, beliefs that we've developed about ourselves, about people, about the world. So we may find it, or the person may find it difficult to establish boundaries because they feel guilty when they do, or they feel that they don't deserve, or they don't feel the right to establish boundaries. The main factor, however, that plays a role is just plain fear. Fear of rejection. If I say no to others, they're going to reject me, they're going to push me away. The fear of offending. I don't want to hurt other people's feelings. I don't want to hurt other people. I don't want to make other people feel bad by saying no to them. The fear of no longer being needed, and that is quite a subtle need. Very often, particularly with people who are codependent, people pleasers, they thrive on the feeling of being needed. And although people's requests or people's demands may cause them frustration and inconvenience, they may have an unconscious fear that if I say no, people won't ask me for help again. And that may affect my need for being needed. We'll explore that a little bit further in the next few slides. So these are the factors that are very important for us to be aware of if we realize that there is an area in our lives where we lack boundaries. And of course, there are different kinds of boundaries that will apply to different areas of our lives. But for the sake of this workshop, we will focus more on general boundaries.
I heard that you learned in the process to be able to say, no, I'm not able to do that, which I'm going to take that line from you. No, I'm really not able to do that.
That is my no is a complete sentence, which is I'm sorry, no, I'm not able to do that. And that's all I say. And it's really hard to say that to people. It's very interesting how, wired we are to tell somebody 1,000 reasons why we can't do something for them. You say, I can't do it because of this and this, and as if you were required
to defend your niceness.
Yes,
your nicehood. Yes.
Right, yeah, I'm a good person.
I'm a good person.
Nice.
I want you to think I'm nice, and so I'm going to tell you why, all the reasons why. So you got that. You figured that out. When people are giving you counsel and people are giving you advice, the vast majority of counsel that you'll get is coming from a place of love and from a place of peace. Yeah. But then understand at that end, you have to make that decision and be perfectly comfortable with the decision that this is in the best interest of me and where I am right now. And one thing we know about all the decisions that we make is you are never going to make a decision that 100% of people say that's a great decision.
Ain't that the truth?
Never. And that's okay. The thing I then try to lean on is don't let people that don't matter too much matter too much. We're worried about what X person thinks or what Y person thinks. I'm like, why do they have so much influence over your decision making or your life? Yeah. Because the decision that you make is not going to impact them, nor is anything they do should it impact you. So don't let people that don't matter too much matter too much.
Don't we do that? Don't we take on other people's stuff and make it about us when we don't know that we matter? When you don't know you matter, you will make somebody else's crazy about you. You got your own stuff to handle. You don't have to take on anybody else's. But I made my grandmother's neatness and her crazy and her impatience all about me. And I didn't know that I mattered because I took on what was given to me as my own. We have a tendency to do that. And it was many years later, when I understood my grandmother's story. You see, we get our meaning and our mattering from our story. And if we tell the story in a way that disempowers us, we won't know that we matter even in the midst of the story.
So it is okay to say no. It is okay not even to go into too much detail to explain why I say no. No is a full sentence. And one of the things I've learned in my own journey of learning how to set clear boundaries, or my ability to set boundaries or my inability to set healthy boundaries, are directly related to my sense of worth, my sense of value. Do I feel I have the right to say yes and no? And as I said in the beginning, a boundary is simply me deciding what I will allow myself to experience and what not. And in addition to that is I will decide what I say yes to, and I will decide what I say no to on my terms. The question I would like you to think about: could a lack of boundaries be a form of manipulation? What on earth does that mean? Well, one of the challenges that some people have when it comes to setting boundaries is the fear of being rejected or the fear of no longer being needed. So could my lack of boundary maybe be an unconscious form of manipulation, which is really what people pleasing and risking is all about, is I am pretty much unconsciously manipulating people into liking me, into needing me, and, well, pretty much a dysfunctional way of looking at how to relate to people. And I remember when I first thought about this, it took me a while to really get my head around this, how a lack of boundaries could be a form of manipulation, until I started to look at my own life. And I started to realize at some level that I was manipulating people into liking me and needing me, because those were the two greatest needs that I had because of my dysfunctional background and lack of ways and means to meet my own emotional needs. So it took me quite a while to think about that and to assess how I was using my lack of boundaries to manipulate others. There's something called the Karpman triangle or the drama triangle. I want to include some of the principles about this and link it to boundaries. The essence of the drama triangle really is the quality of interaction or relationship between people who have no boundaries and who are unable to take personal responsibility. Now, one person could play all three of these roles, or two people could play these roles, or it could be three people. But this is normally the outcomes when people are in a relationship, as I said, without boundaries and without taking personal responsibility. And we're going to start off with the victim. The victim is the person who is overwhelmed by their own vulnerabilities, by their own lack of boundaries, who is hurt very easily. And they don't take responsibility for their own situation. They blame others, or they expect others to fix and save them. And I can so relate to that, because I was world champion victim for most of my life because of my upbringing and some of the negative experiences that I had throughout my life. So where there is a victim, invariably there is a persecutor, a stronger person, also somebody without clear boundaries and somebody not taking responsibility. And they will tend to be triggered by the victim. They would react to the victim out of frustration. And the persecutor is somebody who is unaware of their own power, because they very often are people who are quite strong in character and strong in nature. And therefore they discount it. They don't take personal responsibility to do what they need to do. They find somebody else to blame. They find somebody else to project onto. They don't take personal responsibility. They project onto others. And their power is used in a very negative and destructive way. Where there is a victim and a persecutor, there's very often a rescuer. And the rescuer is also somebody who does not take personal responsibility and who has no clear boundaries, and they need somebody to fix and somebody to save in order to feel better about themselves. So the rescuer will try and fix and save the victim. The victim will demand from the rescuer to fix and save them, and or the victim will blame the persecutor for their problems, and the persecutor will direct their frustration and anger onto the victim. And you've got this dance moving back and forth. And of course, the same person can move from one role to the other. If I'm a victim and my rescuer decides to stop playing into my demands and into my manipulation, and they start to put clear and healthy boundaries, I may then move into the persecutor role and become the persecutor of my former rescuer, and my former rescuer could now move into the victim role. So you can see how these roles move back and forth, and how this is all the result of a lack of personal boundaries and a lack of personal responsibility. And of course, how do we address this? First of all, by putting clear, healthy boundaries in place, and by taking personal responsibility for our lives. So the victim moves now into a place of becoming more of a creator of his or her own life and reality. The rescuer cannot turn into a supporter, because this is all very much related to personality types as well, because the rescuer very often tends to be the natural, empathetic, compassionate kind of person. So they can become supporters in a healthy way, and the persecutor, who invariably, as I said, is a stronger kind of personality, can become a teacher or a coach for that matter, that are able to assist others by giving them healthy feedback. So this drama that plays out is the result of a lack of personal boundaries. So you can see how important it is to put those personal boundaries in place and to take personal responsibility to contribute towards the formation of healthy relationships and interaction. How do I know when a boundary is being violated or when there is an imposition? Especially if I've been one who for a long time did not have clear boundaries because of the various reasons that we've looked at before, where maybe I was a victim or I didn't want to hurt people. And now that I'm learning to put healthy boundaries in place, how will I know when it is the need for me to communicate the boundary that I've put in place? Well, the main feedback would always be a sense of frustration. Frustration, anger always serves as feedback that something is being forced onto me. I am expected to do something I don't want to do. I'm forced to experience something I don't want to experience. There's some kind of violation, whether it be my personal space that is being violated, or my values that are being violated, or my self-worth that is being violated by people's behavior or people's opinions or what people are saying. And that feedback or that sense of frustration tells me, John, this is an area where you can potentially learn and grow in by paying attention to what is the lack of boundary in this particular area. How do I set those personal boundaries? Now that I understand the need for boundaries, now that I understand some of the factors that may have contributed towards my lack of boundaries, how do I go about setting these boundaries? Well, first of all, it's important to define the boundary, identify the desired boundary. Look at areas in your life where now, in hindsight, you realize there have been violations or impositions or demands. And decide these are areas that I'm going to decide what I will allow myself to experience or no longer experience, and what I will say yes to and no to on my terms. And it might take a bit of time. I may need to do a bit of research and do a bit of homework. Maybe ask myself some questions. And there are very good exercises available online that we can sort of assess ourselves to see where we need to establish clear boundaries. The next point, as I've intimated earlier on, communicate the boundary. A boundary that is not communicated does not exist. Say what it is that you need. Stay simple. No is a full sentence. I don't have to go into a long tirade of explanations. Why? Because that in itself could be a sign of people pleasing or rescuing. I don't want the person to feel bad, so I'm going to go into detail to explain. No need for that. This is not convenient for me right now. I don't want to do this right now, and that is sufficient. And then another very important principle, set consequences. Should you continue to violate this boundary, I will need to. A consequence is not punishment. A consequence is not a threat. It is communicating what I will need to do should this violation or imposition continue. And it's not telling the other person what to do. It's me telling them what I'm going to do should this situation continue. A very good technique that we can use, or tool that we can use, is to use these words. If somebody continues to insult me, maybe playfully, because some people just think that may be funny because that is their sense of humor, But for me, being an introvert and shy person, I find it very difficult to deal with that for the most part. So instead of complaining and resisting and fighting or ignoring, I've now decided I'm going to put healthy boundaries in place. I'm no longer going to allow myself to experience the embarrassment or the frustration. I'm going to allow this person to do this. So I feel when you, I prefer, how do you feel about that? So in a situation that I've just mentioned, I feel very embarrassed when you joke with me in front of people. I would prefer that you are more aware of the fact that I'm an introvert and I'm shy. How do you feel about that? Because by asking how the person feels about that, there's a sense of acknowledgement and involvement. So it's not making a demand on them. You are communicating your need. So you are communicating your feelings in the situation, and you are communicating what you need in the situation. Now, something I've learned that is even more effective to add to the technique is to exclude you, remove you. So instead of saying, I feel when you, and the reason why I think it is important to exclude you, because it sort of takes away maybe the feeling of blame or accusing. So I feel embarrassed when I am the brunt of a joke. I feel hurt when I am being insulted, because that also adds to the personal responsibility. So I feel embarrassed when I am teased in front of others, and that sort of eliminates the finger pointing. And I just found that really, really works even better than simply saying, I feel when you. And as I said, it just increases my level of personal responsibility, and also takes the person out of the equation where they may feel being accused. What are the benefits, or what is implied by personal boundaries? I said earlier on that my lack of boundaries are very often an indication, or is very often an indication of my sense of self-worth. So when I establish and communicate clear boundaries, it says that I am enough, I am worth the effort, I am worth the respect. It also tells me it is not my job to fix others. I can say no when people ask me for things, when people make demands. It is okay if others get angry. That is not me making them angry, is what I'm saying that is triggering something inside of them, and they will just need to get over it. It is not my issue. It is okay to say no. No is a full sentence. It is not my job to take responsibility for others. How other people feel about my boundary is not my business, not my responsibility. I don't have to anticipate the needs of others. If people really need help and I am in a position to help them, that will not disadvantage or have a negative effect on me, and I've got the time and the means to do so, then great. But a lot of people, well, not a lot of people, some people very often, the victims in particular, are very good at playing the victim role and sort of insinuating without directly asking, and then being upset if we don't offer the help. So if people don't ask for help, don't help them. If they do ask for help, operate from within your boundaries and decide whether you can and will help them or not. It is my job to make me happy. It sounds so selfish, and it's exactly meant to be that. If I don't take care of myself, I cannot take care of somebody else. If I don't do what I need to make myself feel happy and make myself feel good, I'm in no way able to make other people feel happy. People only add to where I am at already, and I can only add to where people are at already. Nobody has to agree with me. People are going to disagree. People are going to see things differently from the way I do, and that is okay. I have a right to my own feelings. If I feel frustrated, if I feel taken advantage of, if I feel inconvenienced, I've got the right to feel that way. And then it is my responsibility to take the appropriate action to address those feelings by putting healthy boundaries in place, to decide where I'm going to put those boundaries in place, and then to communicate those boundaries. I'm going to finish off by reading a quote by Donna Wood with regards to boundaries that I found very, very powerful. When enforcing our boundaries, first and foremost, we are caring for ourselves. It is something I'm doing for myself. It is a service that I render to myself. It is a sign of respect for myself. It is something that I do to help myself when I enforce healthy boundaries. But we are also helping others to have a clear understanding of what we consider acceptable behavior. Right in the beginning, I made the statement, we teach people how to treat us. So if I have healthy boundaries in place and I'm able to communicate that I'm in the process, I'll also help others to understand where they are with me and what the relationship with me is all about and what I will consider to be acceptable behavior and what not. We are reflecting back to them what is not acceptable and therefore providing them with an opportunity to consider that information and to make necessary changes. So we can actually teach people who don't have boundaries to become more aware of the lack of boundaries and to become more aware of the reasons why they don't have boundaries. And that feedback may be able to help them. So it's really a two-way street. I create a safe space for myself, and I may also be able to help somebody else on their own journey of establishing boundaries. If we ignore the behavior or accept the behavior, not only are we undermining ourselves, harming ourselves, causing frustration or unhappiness for ourselves, but we are denying the other person an opportunity to learn about themselves and to grow. And ultimately, we deny them the opportunity for a healthy relationship with us. Now, I just need to put this in there that is not our responsibility. But the whole idea here is just to focus on the amazing benefits when we do establish and communicate clear boundaries, how we benefit and how somebody else may also benefit in the process. It's a sign of respect for myself, and it's a sign of support and assistance towards somebody else as well, if we take the time to establish clear boundaries. Well, thank you for spending this time with me, and I hope that you were able to glean some benefit from some of the principles that we discussed. A copy of this video is available that you can obtain at 50 Rand. And if you would like to do that, you can drop me a line at john.ttklife@gmail.com. Or if you have any questions or queries or something you would like to maybe have a chat about, again, you are more than welcome to drop me a line at john.ttklife@gmail.com. I do online coaching. I present a free half-an-hour session where you can tell me what it is that you're looking for. I can tell you how I go about it, and you can decide whether there's a match or not. Or just any kind of feedback. I'm always open for feedback or just anything you would like to share. So thank you for your time, and I wish you well on your journey towards establishing clear boundaries. All the best.